Welcome everyone to the RPG Goblin. In today's episode, we are going to be going behind the mist and talking about the MC's Toolkit, which is the book that's actually for the people who would like to run City of Mist itself. And so we will be delving in and talking about how to be a master of ceremonies for City of Mist, how to construct these conspiracy iceberg mysteries that your players will be finding out, how to create powerful and interesting NPCs that fill this city. And we talk about some of the lore that the MC Toolkit actually has for the city itself. This is a fantastic episode, and I brought on Hunter again from the first City of Mist episode to talk about all of this with me. Also, as a little bit of a treat, I suppose, there's actually quite a lot of talk about running games in general in this episode, and Hunter and I talk about experiences with refereeing games and mistakes and stuff like that. So, if all of this sounds like a great time to you, get comfortable and let's get into it. Welcome everyone to the RPG Goblin. I am your host Willow, and this is a podcast where we talk about TTRPG games and basically just go on a deep dive and explore them. In today's episode, we are going to be, this is actually a part 2 to the City of Mist episodes that we have been doing. If you haven't listened to the first episode yet, please do that. But in today's episode, we are specifically going to be talking about the MC Toolkit. So basically, the MC Toolkit is for the person who is running the game, and we are going to be talking about the information that is in that book. And like the previous episode, we have on Hunter again to be our guest. Hunter, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello once again, listeners. I am once again Hunter the GM, also known as Hunter the Master of Ceremonies. And I am also the one behind the Mysteries Unknown podcast and the upcoming, soon-to-be behold, I Don't Know How to DM podcast, where I run everything else that's not City of Mist, Powered by the Apocalypse, etc., etc. But today, we are going to be cracking open the Master of Ceremonies Toolkit book, so we can see if you are a first time running this game, just some tips and tricks and all the different details that you need to successfully try to run one.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited about this because City of Mist, like we were talking about before, is a game that I've been super interested in. And so getting more into kind of the game runner side, I'm super excited about that. Or I guess Master of Ceremonies side. So I guess the first thing is, what is the MC Toolkit? Like, how does it describe itself?
It's funny that we asked that question because literally when you open this book, the first sentence that this book gives you is that the Master of Ceremonies is the most important role in the game. The MC is the host, the referee, and the narrator of the game. Oh, and just to let everyone know real quick before I continue, these books will usually refer to the Master of Ceremonies using the she, her pronouns. So if I say she, this is what they did. This is not me. This is how they did it. They'll refer to like players and sometimes yourself using the he, him pronouns, and the MC will usually be like she, her pronouns, just to kind of get that cleared up so no one gets confused at all there.
Absolutely.
And says, she also writes most of the locations, characters, and situations that the lead characters will encounter, just like in a TV show, while it's possible, even if undesired, to have an episode without one of the lead characters, it is much harder to have one without the showrunner. The role of the MC can be passed around in the group with different members of your group taking it up for a session or a case, or you could have a single player as a recurring MC, and that is like the first paragraph once you crack open that book.
Amazing. Yes, absolutely. So this is basically supposed to help you run your City of Mist games, right?
Yes, it has almost everything that you would need to know. So just because I know we're going to deep dive, I'm just going to kind of give some synopsis. So the first chapter it goes in is the Word on the Street chapter. And this is the one that goes over like the main locations in the game and kind of like the stuff that goes on in them as well. The second chapter is behind the scenes, and this is how to create and run the cases. And it gives you like all the different moves you can do, how you'll write the case, how to design it, etc., etc. And then the last one is called This Is My City. And the third chapter, this is how you will run your dangers and your avatars in this game, should you choose to do so.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. Oh my God. Yes, I'm really excited about this. First, though, I mean, we were talking beforehand, and you actually mentioned that you haven't gone through the entire MC Toolkit before this. Because I assume you've at least looked at it before you started to run your own games, right?
I looked at it like a little bit, but it's kind of one of those things. So the City Mist YouTube page, also Kevin Carpenter, who's of the Rolling in the Mist podcast, works with him. He does videos where it goes over like different parts of the book, like how to run like a heist scene or how to make your own dangers, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that stuff I kind of learned beforehand from watching just these videos as well. And so I took some stuff from this book, but a lot of it I just kind of was just like throwing out into the wind with how I was going to run the games for the most part. And so, but actually opening this and going through it, I learned quite a bit more about like how to do certain things and all that. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm curious. I think since you've been running the game for a while, I'm curious to cover first kind of the big pieces of information that you learned since you read through the book for the first time.
Well, when I was kind of going through this, like a lot of stuff I was just kind of somewhat able to skim over because it's like, yeah, this was like some of the stuff I knew, like kind of like how to run a session, kind of creating some of the dangers and all that. Definitely kind of learning more about the areas in the city was actually kind of interesting to read about, just so that way you can kind of get a more understanding. Because in City Mist lore, some areas are more shrouded by the mist than others. So there's some areas where you'll go and you won't see anything. But then if you go to a place like, let's say, the Old Quarter, where there's a very thin layer of mist, this is where you will see more of like the mythos and people like come out.
Oh yeah, no, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
So after that first paragraph, there's literally a first page that literally just describes down the roles of the MC. And it goes into, the first one is you as the writer. And this is just saying that you are the one preparing the case that your group will investigate. And basically it's like, yeah, this is to help you get to learn as to how to be a writer of all these different games. And so I just think I just like that it's going into details of like how specific your role is when you're running City of Mist.
Yeah, what you need to keep in mind.
Yeah. And then this next one that it goes into, which is something that I really think I struggle in, is you as the referee. You're also the referee of the game. Between and during sessions, you have the final say on how to interpret and apply the rules of the game. And I think this is one, especially for me, that a lot of people struggle with, because when you're trying to focus on having a good time at the table, I think some people just end up letting things slide instead of just like saying you can't do that. Because I mean, of course, there is like the rule of cool, which should be applied to any game, in my opinion. That's one thing. So I actually had this happen in the case I last recorded, and because there's a lot of stuff that's going to be edited out for this reason, unfortunately. And it's also why I'm half tempted to just say I'm always half tempted to just say I try not to have other GMs at my table, because these are the ones that will kind of try to start the most arguments on what they can do or say. And I'm not saying that that's entirely a bad thing, but when it becomes a common occurrence, I feel like you gotta draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, you don't always want to be arguing or going through, the rules and stuff at the table, especially when you're trying to play a game and you don't want it to get, sidetracked for like 10 minutes and get distracted with, does this rule say this or what? So yeah, that's definitely very important for the GM to take on that referee role. Is there any specific advice that you may have or the book has for how to handle that?
Let's see. It says, here we go. When you make decisions regarding the rules, your guiding principle should be ensuring the enjoyment of everyone at the table. If a certain rule gets in the way of fun, make an exception. If it repeats, consider changing or ignoring the rule. However, note that enjoyment is a complicated thing. Some rules exist to maintain a certain level of challenge in the game or to counterbalance other rules. So consider well what you keep or discard, and be ready to retrace your steps if you find that the play experience isn't matching your expectations. Throughout the book, you will find text boxes with optional rules which will allow you to tweak the level of challenge and complexity of your game without breaking its balance. So basically, it's going into saying, like, yeah, make that exception if you want to make sure enjoy it, if you want to make sure everyone's having fun. But if it's starting to get out of hand, kind of hit that hammer on the head kind of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always think fun is the number one thing that you should be having at a TTRPG game. You should always be having fun. So that's great that they prioritize that over going through the rules specifically and kind of making that the big thing. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So you mentioned if you want to share, you mentioned an experience where there was some issue with having to referee within one of your games.
So
would you mind hearing that?
So this specific situation, and I'm not going to name names because me personally, I have no issue with this person whatsoever. They were, in the long run, it was actually one of the best games I ever ran, despite some of the challenges that may have happened. I still enjoyed running this game for them. And the other players said that it was a good game too. Okay, so I don't know if one of the things I remember talking about in the last episode was your power tags are usually have to be specific to what your character can do, with the exception you're allowed to do one broad tag, but you can do almost anything with. Now, my kind of rule of thumb is if you want to use that broad tag, like for a few things, yeah, that's great. But if you're just constantly using it over and over and over again, I consider that like an abuse of a power tag. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to, and this player had been using it like so many times in a row. I was trying to say, okay, there has to be something that this power tag can't be used. Yes, I understand that it's broad, but that doesn't mean that every single acting thing you do can be applied to it. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I'm not blaming the other players for this at all. They kind of sided with the other players as well. And at that point, I was just like, okay, fine, I'll let it pass. I kind of wish I was a little more firm on it because I feel like I let a lot of things slide after that too because of that kind of that decision. Mm-hmm. But it's like, that was just kind of one of my personal things is I don't want people to always be abusing power tags in the game because I feel like if you're just abusing it, you're not really expressing the creativity that this game is implying that you need to be doing with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's different play styles, of course, and different people are going to want to do different things at the table. But I agree, you know, it doesn't let you be able to explore more creatively like that, think of different solutions. So that's really unfortunate that happened. But, you know, I think those moments, even if it's like, you know, like I wish I made a different decision, can help in the future with being better at putting your foot down or, you know, making a call on a rule of like, you know, this is just a adjustment that we need to make.
Yeah, and it's also kind of the reason why I haven't been doing as much CMS stuff, and I've been looking more at other tabletop games as well, just because this incident also kind of opened my eyes to seeing like a lot of the gatekeeping that was starting to go on in like the own like City of Mist Discord as well. Because I think I can't remember. I don't know if I said it on here or if I said it on another show I was doing. But when the whole WotC thing started going down and everyone started spreading out to other TTRPGs, those people were coming into communities, but they weren't changing who they were like as players. So if they were that guy at the D&D table, they're still being that guy at the City of Mist table. Mm-hmm.
And that is the unfortunate thing with other TTRPGs. I shouldn't say the unfortunate thing. There's always going to be a TTRPG out there for anyone, no matter your play style, no matter what. Though I think people end up picking games that don't fit their play style and the way they want to play most of the times, which ends up in situations like that where, you know, you need to have the person there to be the referee and make sure that things go smoothly. Which, I mean, you know, great thing that people are going out and trying different games, but it's always a good idea to actually look at what you enjoy from a game and find a game that will fit that need for you.
Agreed. So the last two things it says for the rules of the MC is, and these are kind of fit in the same thing, is you as the host and you as the narrator. Basically saying that you are hosting this game for these people and you decide who's getting the spotlight at the table, but when they would go, because like I said before, there's no initiative in City of Mist. Everyone's just kind of free, willy-nilly saying what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to the MC to decide, okay, you want to do what? You want to do what? We're going to go to you first, and then once you're done, we're going to cut to you, kind of deal. No, you're good. You as the narrator, you're basically the one telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
And you're deciding what's going to happen in the story, what moves cause what, that kind of deal. And it's just, and like I said, especially the narrator role, I think is one I really enjoy having that, because just again, the creativities with this game are what I enjoy the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the stories that you shared last time with just all the different things that you've created as like NPCs and situations, I can very much see that. I think that's the best part of any any GM role in any game that you can play. There's just so much. I mean, being a player is fantastic, don't get me wrong. But running a game and just the creativity and being able to work with the players and the story and what happens and the creativity just wrapped up in that, so fun.
Yeah. So that actually ties into what we were just talking about earlier. Before this podcast started, I was telling you about me being a player for my second TTRPG and playtesting a game that was both diceless and GM-less.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I was skeptical about it. But when I started actually playing the game, I got to realize how much more creativity that actually left me to mess with.
Yes.
So, for those who don't know, you can actually find this on itch.io. It's called Uncanny Incorporated. It's just a playtest doc right now. But it's a basically GM-less and diceless mechanic where you're playing basically at a supernatural office. And you're working at this said office as just office workers. And there's different playbooks. It's basically set up similar to Powered by the Apocalypse games. It has playbooks for your characters, and you have certain moves and things you can do. And my playbook I chose was the Office Slacker. And literally one of the things I got to set up was I got to set up a scene where my slacker started a conga line with all the office ghosts because we worked for the HR Department of Death.
As one does.
So, yeah.
That's so good.
Actually, and this was another good one. I forgot about this. If you go to the next page in the MC Toolkit, it goes over the MC principles. And I'm not going to go too deep into this. I'm just going to kind of bullet point it. So the principles for being the MC are communicate with the group. So very obvious one right there. Make sure you're communicating with everyone in the group.
Yes,
play to find out. And that's playing into the narrative aspect where if you want to do something, play it and find out what happens kind of deal. Don't just say, I think it also says in here, don't try to set everything up like word for word. Let it play out, find out what happens, play as you go. Then this one I actually like. It's be the character's biggest fan, make their lives interesting. Because you're creating this world for them to be in. Make the lives of the players in this game interesting. Like, just throw stuff out there if you have to. Make it just as fun as can be. And then the last one is think thematic, because again, this is supposed to be a mystery noir type game. And it actually says in the book that when you use words like pan out, cut to, fade to black, these are actual things that it encourages you to use in the game because it's treated almost like a mystery noir type film.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's really good. I like that a lot. And I mean, I think I said this in the last City of Mist episode, but I love the direction of even the wording with the stuff like the, principles being more themed towards a TV show. Because I think that's just such an easy way to get into that mindset when you're actually running the game and just think, oh, well, what would it be like in a TV show?
Yeah. And so those first two pages, I think, are very detrimental for if you're trying to be a first-time MC. You definitely want to take those roles and principles to heart to make sure you're just doing it to the best of your ability. And with that, we can now start going into the main meat of this book with the first chapter, the cinematography of the city. And it describes in the first paragraph of this page, the city is the backdrop of your story. Its streets, alleyways, and rooftops are where your crew will uncover the disturbing truths, unleash their mighty powers in the fight for what matters to them the most, and make harsh sacrifices.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're
very, very exciting.
And it just goes into like the different parts of like what you will find in like an urban area of Syria. Like it goes into like its geography, the infrastructure, transportation, population demographics, you name it. It's probably there somewhat to an extent. Goes into describing your city in the game. It goes into how to use the districts. And then there's the nature of the city.
Mm-hmm. And so
Because
how helpful did you find all this information for giving like more structure to the city as a MC?
So originally, I think when I was running games, I wasn't focused on as much of like how these districts were, unless they played like a part of the story. I was more focused of the stuff that was happening in them. So, but if you're trying to like have things happen in like certain areas, I definitely would say this does provide more of a detail for like how something works.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually goes very depth into details. Like, for example, the first one it talks about is the downtown area. And it says downtown is where it's all happening. It's the beating heart of the city, pumping millions of souls in and out every day, locals and visitors of all walks of life who come here for business, pleasure, or both. And it just goes into like what you will find. Like there's places of interest, the subway station, Theater Avenue, the alley, or the financial district. And it goes and it has a little thing in here that talks about, like we were saying, the thin places where the mist is thinner, where your mythos can more come out. It'll actually also tell you like the locals in the area. And it actually says like if they have mythos, it'll say it like there's a local in downtown named Judas Wells, who's the rift of the Frog Prince.
No, that's awesome. I like that they give you all of that context and setup, especially because if you want to run your own game and kind of the actual like city that they set up, it makes it so much easier and just gives you all of these things that you can just grab and use. Though it seems like it also has enough wiggle room that you can even put your own aspects into the city as well.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, this is like you can make all this work to whatever story you're running, depending on how you're going to run it. So, like I said, and then like another one, like I was talking about, one I like to use is the Old Quarter. And centuries ago, maybe even millennia, migrating people first settled in the area that is now the city. They were met by indigenous tribes, as history tells us, or if you want the romanticized version, by monsters, spirits, and gods. Their settlement thrived and evolved, growing greater in fortune and population as time went by. Eventually, it became this city you see before you, but it all started here in the Old Quarter.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, because the Old Quarter is supposed to be like, this is where it all started for the city. So you'll find like all the antique parts of the city here. Like there's a museum there. The university of the city is also there. And there's also a ruin. There's a ruin of some cities because again, it's old. And then you'll find myths of like Ella Kirky of Circe the sorceress.
So many different things. Oh yeah. So what is that place?
Here we go. So for each one, there's a section it's called Beyond the Mist. And this goes into like how the mist plays in they're called districts in this. So it says the Old Quarter seems to be where the mist is thinnest in town. Whether that's due to some mystical property of this quarter is beyond anyone's knowledge, but it might just be that in the Old Quarter, the mist simply has less work to do. The people who live and come here already know this place is weird and they expect nothing less of it. With this reinforced suspense of disbelief in place, the mist can concentrate its work elsewhere. As a result, the Old Quarter is the district with the most newly awakened people. It is the perfect place for the touched, who can explore their mythos under the guise of artistic or academic pursuits.
Oh, that's so cool. Now all I can think as well is a freaking playing as a character who's an artist in this game with a really weird mythos.
Yeah. Well, speaking of weird mythos, there's also like sometimes there's a case where a group of people have the same mythos. Like there's a family in the Old Quarter called the Dumonts, and they're all the rift of the Hunchback of the Notre Dame.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I also love how last episode we talked about Baba Yaga, and the Old Quarter already has someone with the rift of Baba Yaga.
They already knew. They already had it set up.
Yeah. And then it just keeps on going to other places. And there's like a couple other districts that it mentions as well. They're just kind of like smaller areas that maybe some stuff happens, but not high. Like there's the ethnic Borough. which is like it's just basically it's supposed to be based on places like Chinatown, Jamaica Town, Japantown, Koreatown, Little Italy, Little Greece, Spanish Quarter, etc. That's kind of what the idea for the ethnic borough is. Then you have the beachfront. There's the crime-ridden slum, the gated community, just a bunch of other different places that you can just use to your limits to explore and all that.
Absolutely. Oh man, that is really cool. I like that they have all of that you, I mean, you use the exact word, explore. Like you can just explore these different places that they have set up, and that just sounds so cool.
And then it has a section that's called What the League Characters Don't Know Yet. It's time to bring you up to speed on what is really happening in the city. Up to this point in this chapter, the city is described from the perspective of the lead characters' relatively new rifts who are only beginning to discover the secret world around them. At least some of the characters know that there are other rifts in the city, people like them who have legendary powers. And like the lead characters' own powers, those legendary powers are hidden from the larger population by the mystical veil of the mist. What the characters don't know is that the city is the playground or war zone of two types of arcane and timeless forces, the Mythoi and the Mist. And this one goes into, it talks about the Mythoi, their avatars, and their operations. So it's basically saying, like, how do these Mythoi play a role in the city? Mm-hmm. And then there's the Mist, and like we talked about, the Gatekeepers. And the Gatekeepers are the ones that use the weaponize the Mist to hide the rift activity from the sleepers. And the sleepers are, again, basically the muggles of, like, Harry Potter. They have no powers.
Normal people. Absolutely. No, that's really cool. Actually, this makes me think, what is the advice that the MC Toolkit gives for creating NPCs and avatars and stuff like that within the city?
I think that was going to go more into the third chapter when it goes into like all the dangers and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we can either, you want to go ahead and fast forward to that, or do you want to go into the next chapter, which talks about how to create and run cases?
I'm curious about the NPCs, and then we can get into cases, because I definitely want to cover that.
So chapter 3, This is My City, about dangers and avatars. And then it says, throughout the series, the lead characters are destined to encounter a wide range of characters, locations, and situations that will challenge them or pose a threat to their investigation or their lives. Such threats can be rifts endowed with legendary powers or mundane adversaries and hazards. Mm-hmm. So, like, basically this is saying that sleepers can be enemies, and also you can actually imbue locations with rift powers as well.
Yeah, and make that like kind of an enemy or a hazard, like you said. Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like how we talked about when I was talking about my Baba Yaga rift, how she had the chicken leg hut. If they were to discover that hut, that could itself be a danger of its own.
For sure, yeah. And I actually, after we did that episode, I did like a prompt thing for a TTRPG challenge that I'm doing, where I'm basically like writing story ideas, and I wrote a whole prompt with the idea of essentially like a haunted house that was actually truly a haunted house, but it seemed like just like a Halloween party house that someone got invited to, but in reality it's actually like a real haunted house that slowly gets revealed. And I just love the idea of being able to use actual locations as threats. It's so cool.
Yeah, so I kind of did that with the my Halloween one shot I did last year. The house that my players went to find the horror movie monster rifts they were fighting. I kind of took inspiration from the Monster House from the Monster House movie.
Oh, that's
in that
so
regard.
Cool.
Yeah, because that's such an underrated movie in itself. Monster House was so good. I'm sorry, were you about to say something?
I was going to say I've never heard of it. Actually.
You've never seen Monster House?
No.
Oh my God, you have not lived yet.
Unfortunately, I haven't seen as many movies as I would like to have seen.
You have to look it up and watch it at some point. It's really good. You will not be disappointed, I promise. Back to, so before it goes into the creating of the NPCs and dangers, it talks about like dangers and statuses and the spectrums. And So, like I was talking about in the last episode, instead of like gaining or losing HP, you will take and lose statuses, and you can get them from 1 all the way up to 6. With 5 being you're unconscious, but you're still able to do something. And 6 being either you're dead or changed extraordinarily in some way. That's all to the MC's discretion. And it goes over to like it shows some examples of like how to like what kind of like examples of like what kind of stats you can give them, and then the spectrums are more like how much the damage or what does this person have to do to the danger to get them to stop attacking them, because you don't have to like just beat them into submission to beat them. You could convince them to do something. You can inflict some other sort of status to them. Like I did one game where basically these the players were fighting against the some corrupt police officers that were the Rift of the Three Musketeers, and she used nightmare abilities to basically scare them away.
Oh, I like that a lot. I love whenever a game will give you options for non-violent things. It just, again, opens up that creativity to have even more fun.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes into, like, spectrums as ongoing conflicts. Like, you can, like, have spectrums for, like, long periods of time until you, like, be a condition of them. There's countdown spectrums, which is, like, if this spectrum gets to so much, or if it gets down so much, it's going to cause something to happen. What it is, you're going to find out the hard way.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Oh, yeah, no, that kind of, so it's like a countdown? Sort of like, reminds me of Blades a little bit, where you have like those countdown clocks that, you know, you slowly make progress to have something big happen.
Yeah, it literally counts it as a countdown a countdown spectrums is literally what they're called in the City of Mist. Like, if I find one on here, we'll do it. I'll talk about more. And then there's like immunities. So like you can have it to where dangers are like immune to certain things. Like in my Demons of Crosshead case, that Staghead demon, the only way he could really be like hurt is with holy powers. And if it was like anything else besides a holy power attack, it was like the stats of it was lowered by like 4 or something. So like unless you had like a sword that was like engraved with like some holy magic in it, that would be the only way to like kill it without that the immunity taking effect.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I like that. Think creatively.
Yeah. Then it goes into danger moves and hard and soft moves. So in the MC Toolkit, not just here as well, it goes into something called hard and soft moves. The soft moves are more like, oh, just this kind of thing happens, but it's not going to affect as much. But if so many things can happen in a row and the players aren't either doing anything or they've tried and they're not succeeding, the MC can then invoke a hard move, which
one of my favorite things about Powered by the Apocalypse.
this is failing. I'm now going to screw you over.
Mm-hmm. Well, something bad happens. It's not even necessarily screw you over. Things are not going in your favor. The environment is going to do something, or not the environment, but the story isn't going to go your way. So a hard move is just adding more complications to the story because you aren't making the progress that you need to. And it's like really, really cool.
Oh no, some of these hard moves that gives examples could basically screw a player over with depending on what they're trying to do. Like Absolutely. There is like one example is a fatal headshot with dead 6 for the status.
That's a hard move for the MC?
Yes, because there are literally some dangers built in place where it's like if you don't do anything in a certain amount of time, they could just upright.
Oh my god. Well, I mean, but there's things like that where it's like it could be a much bigger threat that you're kind of facing through, and that's like something that would happen near the end, you know, when something
yeah
bad. Because I'm like, hold on, just getting shot in the head. Oh no.
This is just an example of something that a player or a danger can do. It's not going to be like that for everything, but it's like, yeah, this is like if a danger has this hard move in place, if something happens, then yeah, it could do this. But I'm pretty sure it has to be one of those things like you got to meet like a certain situation for that to just suddenly like, pow, you did.
Yeah, you got to do some really bad failing to get to that point. But I mean, I actually really like the way that hard and soft moves are used within like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, or like kind of the ones that are inspired and adjacent. Because I run a Monster of the Week game, and recently in a session, I had 2 players fail when they were trying to do research. And one player was just trying to help the other, and then the other person was trying to research. And with both those failures, kind of coming to the end of the mystery that we're in, that failure caused for their office that they have like all their monster hunting stuff in to actually get broken into and stuff stolen, and
Wow.
caused the victim that is caused a person that they are trying to keep an eye on to essentially get captured by this monster again and is in immediate danger. And if that was near the beginning of the mystery, I wouldn't have done those exact moves because that would be way too soon to kind of put the like final victim in immediate danger. It would have been too much to already have like this one break-in thing happen. So it was like, okay. But as soon as it got kind of like later, what we were talking with the headshot thing, you know, as things get like set up over time and it gets later into the thing, the stakes get higher. Those types of moves get harder. And so just with those failures, because that's how the Powered by the Apocalypse system works for Monster of the Week, is if you fail, a hard move happens. And they are so, so fun. They might fuck over your players a little bit, but they're so fun.
So, something funny that happened during my V is for going viral case I was running. For like the first 3 or 4 sessions, we had a curse going around where the first roll that any player did at the start, the first roll of that session, the player always got snake eyes.
Oh no.
And that happened for like 3 or 4 sessions for a while. So we're like, we're seeing what happens.
Funny.
At first, the same player was the one doing it. And then when it switched over to another player, it happened to him. And then the following player, then the following player for the second roll would roll like an instant success, like a 12 or higher suddenly.
Mm-hmm. The table turns. Well, does City of Mist have that as well? Is it when you roll a failure? Is it you have to, not you have to, but a hard move follows as the MC?
Basically, that's like if you get the 6 or below, yeah, something bad will happen. But if it's a snake, I don't think it really specifies. If you get like the snake eyes, that's even worse. But if it's a failure, I just make it like something fun happen, like a funny failure happens. Like in the my Sources Sky Mummies one shot that I ran with them, 2 of the players were trying to crawl in through the vents in the police station. One got a mixed success and the other one failed. So I had to where she fell from the vent onto the office desk below, right in front of the 3 Musketeer cops.
Oh no. That's heartbreaking. Oh, but that's really good though. And again, the creative uses that just you can do with the hard moves is really, really good. Because again, at least for Monster of the Week, they give like a list of some move examples that you can use for soft or hard to kind of lead up or, you know, do it immediately. And I think it is so helpful, especially because these games are so good at like doing a specific idea well. So they'll just make those moves just to try and help that specific idea come across even more. So like a monster move is like being able to show its full power, which is like really cool and fits really well within Monster of the Week because that's what that game's good at. What are some of the examples for moves in the MC Toolkit?
Because it goes to other stuff, like it talks about using collective. So it's like if you're finding like a group of monsters, you'll start off with like a negative status depending on how many. Like it goes from 1 to a handful, several, many, or a host. Or if you're finding a host of members, you're starting at -4 for your roll.
That sucks.
Yeah. And then it goes into like adding spectrums and moves on the fly because, like I say before, I pull everything out of my butt. And so I'm just, a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the statuses and moves I'll have the dangers do are just on the fly. Like I will take inspiration from like what they've made in the book, but a lot of times I'm not using like what they have set in place. Sometimes just depending on what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just opens it to even more freedom, like creative freedom, and keeps also the conditions relevant.
So if we're going to talk about custom moves and like what moves they do, I say this is a good point for us to have fun. Let's actually go ahead and make our own danger, because it actually shows us like all the different profiles that in the game that we can use to make our own danger.
Absolutely. Hell yeah, let's do it.
All right. So give me how do I want to ask this question? Like, just think of like someone in the city, what their job would be, and what kind of mythos you think they would have.
Oh, good questions. I think that having a butcher character, like a person who works at a butcher shop, would be very cool. Mythos, that is a much harder question because there could be so many interesting things that you can do. Ooh, now I have to try and think of like a character, an idea. I guess the question is, do we want the mythos to fit the kind of idea for the character, or do we want to do something that would be kind of conflicting and interesting?
That is entirely up to you. I will put that decision in your hands.
So, I mean, you've mentioned before how you've done like characters from like games or movies as mythos, right?
Yes.
For some reason, the first thing that's coming to mind is like, and this might be because we've been talking about glitter hearts and like the Moonlight games, is like a magical girl mythos of some kind. Maybe is this for an enemy or just as a NPC?
Basically, dangers and NPCs kind of fall almost in the same category in most part. So they're calling it a danger profile, but this could be like an NPC, and if they angered that NPC, it would then become a danger, and then based on that danger, it would have certain moves and stuff that they could do.
Okay, absolutely. Then I don't know why. Let's go like Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon as the mythos.
So a butcher that has magical girl powers, in a sense, is what we're going for.
Yep.
Okay.
That's an amazing character.
So I think when I'm looking at this, from what the book gives me off the bat, the butcher I would put under the helpless city resident, which is anyone in the city who cannot fend for themselves or does not pose a serious threat can be considered a helpless city resident. Such individuals often need the crew's protection and can be used to support the lead characters or their adversaries. And right off the bat, it has the spectrum of hurt or subdue 1 or scare 1. So they could easily fend off this butcher right off the bat if they wanted to, if he didn't have his mythos. And some of the moves he has, helpless city resident can have one of the following moves according to her background. So it doesn't really have anything that would fit the butcher, but say if it was like a spunky kid, the spunky kid could pick up a stone or pull out a sling. A doctor could give medical assistance to remove a tier of a negative physical status. Ooh, we can say this butcher is like a retired citizen of some sort, so he can give someone a temporary good advice status.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's fun.
So he's like that one of those scenes where it's like he's just chopping up meat and he's talking to someone, giving him advice kind of deal.
Yeah, like as a you're trying to, since this whole thing is like figuring out mysteries and stuff like that, this is someone like you go and visit to try and get more information, and you have a whole scene of where the person's giving you good advice.
Yeah, so I don't know if you actually have this book too or not, but on a lot of these names, some of them will have stars by them. And the stars are basically saying like how much of a threat these people might be. So off the bat, the helpless city residents have A stars because off the bat, they're not that much of a threat. But say if it was someone that was a mover and shaker, which is more like this is someone that's causing a lot of stuff going on in the city, they're a 4-star danger. And then, like I said, it separates them all. Like, so the helpless city resident was from city residents category. You have a criminals category, law enforcement security category, and then, like I was talking about earlier, there's a location and hazards category as well.
Yes,
so
the cool
you
one.
have you have a derelict building, you have a house fire, you have a time bomb danger,
Naturally.
citywide epidemic, and a junkyard compactor as location dangers.
Oh my god. I love that so much. I don't know why. I just think it is so fascinating to have locations as not evil, but like adversaries. It's so cool. It really is. I love that they have it as well. Oh, it makes me so happy.
Okay, and now we're going to go into, so that was basically deciding the Dangers logo, so now we're going to go into the Mythos power set. So I am looking at some of these to figure out which one of these would fit for So there's one here that sticks out. It's called Messenger of the Light, which, for example, it gives like an angel, saint, the fairy godmother, or a white magician. But then when I think about the few episodes I have seen of Sailor Moon, when I think about Tuxedo Mask, one of the moves they have is protection from evil. When a Messenger of Light takes a status from a source that is inherently evil or dark, you can reduce the status by 2.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that even though the Tuxedo Mask has like kind of this, it's almost like this air of dark persona around him, he's still like a very much good, like lighthearted person at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think this one would fit him perfectly. He also would have bless or enchant someone to protect them from evil, or banish the forces of evil or darkness.
God, this is some magical girl shit.
Yeah, and he only would get like one, and of course with all your Mythos Sisters, it adds star ratings to it. So he goes up to a 1-star adversary from being a butcher that's a messenger of light.
That is so cool. What a title. Butcher Messenger of Light. Amazing.
Yeah, but then you also have you have a trickster mythos, a weapon bearer mythos, warrior mythos, and it just tells you like how much like danger it can add on to. Like you can be a demigod, you can be an elemental, a hunter, or a ghost. So
many options.
Yeah, and it tells you like what kind of like examples you could base off. Like for a winged creature mythos, like it could be based around the flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz, Pegasus, or Quetzalcoatl from Aztec mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then from there, it also shows you the other danger profiles that happen in the city. So these are actual created NPCs. So you have actually a person named Alice, who's the Rift of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I've seen this page, and I know there's a Phantom of the Opera one, and I just really like musicals, so.
Yes, there is. I'm trying to remember where I saw that. I can't remember where I saw that, but this one just goes into like a few of them. Like in the Old Quarter, there's the Magic Sword, which is the Rift of the Flaming Sword of Eden.
Oh, that's cool.
Paul Dumont, who's the gargoyle from Quasimodo.
I just love how fun these characters are. They're just so fun.
And one that I've really wanted to mess with on a game, her name is Rachel Delaney, and she's the Rift of Rapunzel, but her hair can transport you throughout the city.
Wow. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man. So, I mean, that's getting into, like, the NPCs and stuff, and it seems like they have a lot of really good materials within the book for creating these avatars and NPCs, and I think that is fantastic. Though I'd love to get a bit more into the cases now, since we wanted to cover that as well.
Yeah, we can come back to the avatars in a bit because it actually goes into, like, one thing that I completely forgot when it comes to avatars is it's not just one person. The avatars have a whole operation of people that work underneath them. So when you're creating avatars, you're not just creating one person, you're creating everyone that's underneath them as well. Kind of like, it's almost kind of like how a mafia family is structured, where you got the Godfather at the head and then all the other underlings.
That's so good. Well, I think that, I mean, that would be so fun, though, to do, like, a super mafia kind of focused, like, City of Mist game where there's, like, all these different, like, quote-unquote families with, like, the different avatars. That would be fun.
Yeah, though. But like I said, Rolling in the Mist are currently doing kind of like a Bad Guys-esque campaign where they're all under the servitude of the Olympus Mafia family, which is all rifts of the Olympus gods.
That's awesome.
And I'm trying to remember... the Rift of Dionysus is just this free-loving party guy, but his name is Donnie Sus.
Donnie Sus. What a dude. Absolutely. Oh, man. That's amazing. I recommend please going to check out like actual plays for City of Mist. Check out Mysteries Unknown, Hunter's podcast. Check out Rolling in the Mist. Check out like anything that you can find, because I think no matter the game, it's going to be so interesting just to hear what people create. Because there's so many opportunities within this game. So please go check out those podcasts and all of that and check out City of Mist itself. Great game.
You can actually find a majority of these Let's Play things on Steam's site. If you hit their media tab, there's a option for actual play shows. And I'm not on there yet, but I put in the form to be on that list. So hopefully I'll be on that list at some point, but it shows all podcasts and YouTube shows. There's also some in other languages too. Like there's a French one, there's a Portuguese one. I think there's a German one on there as well now.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
because
awesome.
because they've been City of Mist has been slowly making City of Mist to be in other languages as well. Because I think they have one in French. I think they're working on a German one. I can't remember for sure at the top of my head. But yeah, this is City of Mist is being played worldwide almost currently.
Yes, that's amazing. I love that this game has gotten a lot of recognition because it's really, really awesome. And I even found it through like seeing it on like social media before even hearing about it. Like before, like I didn't just find it, I heard about it on like social media and things like that. So it's awesome that it's like got so much love and people have really been enjoying it because it is, again, such a cool game.
Yeah, I've seen other like popular like TTRPG YouTubers start talking about now when they talk about like other games besides D&D or like rules like games to play. I've seen City of Mist get mentioned on the list. And I remember one guy, he was talking about Powered by the Apocalypse games, and City of Mist was on the list, and a bunch of us were like, "You forgot City of Mist."
You need to mention it. It's so good.
Yeah, and then he made like another comment in another video. Was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about this City of Mist."
It's a great game. Absolutely. Yeah, so let's get into some of into the what the MC Toolkit recommends for structuring the cases. Because that is like a big, I mean, obviously every single part of this book is a big part of the game, but cases are like the thing that you will be doing. So I'm curious of what it says about those.
All right, so I'm going to be kind of jumping back and forth between, well, we're now rewinding back to the second chapter, which is going behind the scenes. And this is, again, all about how to create it. So I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to discuss writing the case. And when you write the case, you use a method that's called the iceberg effect.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, you have your hooks at the top of the iceberg. And then as you go farther down under the depths, you're learning more until you get to the bottom, which is the truth behind it all. And it actually shows, it gives examples of like how, if you want to make it like deep, like there's like, it starts at like the 0 depth. You can go all the way down to like a depth 4 if you want to be like that involved in this case with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically.
Sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Is this also good for planning out not just sessions, or not, I shouldn't say sessions, not just like a single case, but even like connecting arcs as well? Because that's like the first thing that comes to mind of like being able to structure a much larger picture using this kind of iceberg effect.
Yes. So this is, so you can basically like tie multiple cases to like one big arc. And the fun thing about it, it's not just a straight up and down. Like something from like, let's say depth 1 can go diagonally down to another case that's connected to like depth 2, or something in depth 3 can also connect to something else that's going on at that same depth as well. So it can go like diagonally and side to side as well. Like everything can connect in one way or another depending on how the players play everything out. So it's not all, it's not. Cool. It's not going from straight, here's what happened to, oh, now we solve the case. No, there's like all these different steps you can take to get there depending on what you're doing. Because if you fail on so many rolls and this one thing doesn't work out, you now have this other thing you have to rely on that's going to tie a whole new narrative to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it kind of is an interesting way for the MC to even set up different like plot hooks like within the mysteries, being like, you know, maybe there's this option to go check out and investigate. Now I'm just thinking about the butcher character, the butcher shop, and talk to the butcher, or there's another way that you can actually go and talk to some mythos a like Mythos mafia family. And maybe you could do both of those things, but it's an interesting way to almost like give those options that then connect to things below it, even if you just do one.
Yeah, so sorry, I was just reading over because it then goes into the steps of like how to create everything. And step one, it goes into the backstory. So this is how you're trying to basically, you're writing all out like how everything came to be. Like, why are the players now on this mission? So let's say, for example, let's say the Rift of the Sorcerer Circe is running this, she's running this heist ring where they're stealing priceless jewelry and artifacts. And the Butcher, who's the mythos of Tuxedo Man now, is been trying to put a stop to it and is like succeeding and not succeeding at the same time. So there's a backstory to why this party is now getting involved to this game. And you have stuff like there's basic questions like who's involved in the case, what drives the Rift more, her mythos or her ordinary life? Because like I've discussed many times, your character, it's always trying to balance their humanity and their mythos. So when the case is playing out, who is getting more from this? Who you are in your ordinary life or your mythos that's laid inside you? Who's getting more from this interaction?
Absolutely. I like that. Again, I like the struggle of that a lot. I think that's really cool and that they actually keep that in mind when even structuring the arcs in the cases.
Yeah, and then the second step too is your trail of breadcrumbs. And this is basically going over, okay, you have this all set up, the party's now involved. How are they getting to everything now? What is going to hook them into this and send them on their way to figure out how to solve and stop what's happening? And like I said, it can go any which way. So you can have like 3 different hooks that can tie into different things, but they're all going to lead at some point to the same direction and the same result.
Yes, which is really, really cool. It's like it was this grand master plan that was behind it all along.
Yeah, and then step 3, it goes into adding your dangers. And this is now going into, okay, you have your story laid out. You have all your clues and your places kind of set up. Who are they going to face now? So let's say at some point, the Rift of the Sailor Moon Scouts is going to appear at some point during the middle of their search. They may experience like a couple of them throughout their journey, and they may convince them to either help them out or they may become adversaries for the party. It all comes down to the players and the dice.
Exactly. And I think that's I can't remember if it was one of the principles, but it was something that you said earlier. Play to find out. You are playing to find, you are just, as the MC, you are setting up these situations to then see what happens, which is so cool. I love that so much because exactly, they could become adversaries. They could work with you. They could even provide information, stuff like that. There's so many different ways that it could happen.
Yeah, and that's one thing I will always make sure I emphasize. Like, you can plan out as much of something as you want, but you have to remember at the end of the day, the party is always liable to throw something out the window. It's going to go off the rails in one way or another. I always expect that, which is why I always say I don't even do that much planning usually. I have what I want to start, and I have a few basic ideas for the ending. And then everything else is basically up to chance.
Exactly, because, exactly that, though. The party could just go a completely different direction or do something that you didn't plan for. It's always good to be, like, ready. I agree, though. Very little planning. For my even personal games, I usually do something of a beginning, a middle, and an end of, like, kind of roughly how I want the session or even the kind of mystery or whatever they're working on to go. So I have a base idea in my head, but I'm like refusing to fill out the details because if you end up planning too much, you can be caught in a spot where you don't know what to do when your players do something that isn't something you planned for. So I find that looser planning style to be really, really useful. And that's awesome that you do it as well, because it's like, I'm ready for anything.
So I'm going to share this again really quick because it ties into this, what we're talking about a little bit. So my last episode, I shared how my Demons and Crossends case ended, and it wasn't anything I expected. my original ending that I had thought of for that game was, so one player and an NPC I had said we'd sub story wise they were old war buddies. And the line question, and it had one of these line questions where it was like, because part of the thing in the game is sometimes you have to ask provoking questions. And one of the provoking questions throughout this whole case was, are you a true believer? Because the idea was only the heart of a true believer can shut away the stackhead for good. And my idea was the heart of a soldier, the person that would be willing to lay down their lives for people they don't know for their country, is so pure of heart that because he was the will of the wisp, I was going to basically have my NPC do an ultimate stop holding back move to where he turned into the will of the wisp's tree and sealed the stackhead inside the tree.
That would be really cool, yeah.
But no, instead it was crush him with a church.
Nothing wrong with either endings.
There's not. But I love how it's like, oh, I had this really cool, awesome, like wholesome, sad moment that would have really like added to the story's narrative. And then this player was like, no, we tricked you to set up a thing where we could use the church against the demon. So now we're going to crush it with the entire church remains.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, take holy power, bitch. But yeah, it's just like we just said, you can't plan out too much. But like I said, I usually have like the rough idea of how I want to end. That was my rough idea of how I wanted to end, and it just didn't happen. So
yeah, and it at least gives you some context. It helps you. It helps you kind of move along with the session. You can start hinting at things like that, and even if it doesn't come to fruition, it's still something that kind of keeps the. You still have some like context and you have stuff that you already had planned for the story that you don't have to worry too much about, like, oh, I didn't exactly know. Like you had the basic thing of like the holy, like being able to really be defeated by something holy or like the heart. So there were truly two directions. It's just, it did really go into the holy power church getting squashed direction instead.
Yeah. And then the next part of that chapter, and that's actually ties into what you asked earlier. It goes into about designing a series. And this is more like how to do like multiple cases all into like one overarching story.
Which is so cool.
So you have it goes to like the burning questions, which are like, what are the questions that these players are asking that's going to tie everything together? You have your story elements, your plot ideas, using and building up your series resources, which are like which are like different themes they can come across, like because like I said, they can get extra themes throughout the whole entire story. Like you can get a new relic, or you can steal someone's powers. Like you can plan all this. You can plan some of that stuff. Then it goes into like the story arcs, and then it goes into the bigger iceberg. So like how you have like the regular iceberg for like how a case is ran, you then have the bigger iceberg for how all these cases get ran and fit into the overarching story.
Which is really, really cool. I like that.
Yeah. And then they also have, it goes into the operation iceberg, but that's like we were discussing, your avatar and all the underlings.
Which that's just, figure it out and stuff when you get to it.
Because there is, I'm trying to remember how they call it, because avatars can impose their mythoi onto other people forcefully as well. I think this is what they call, there's like you have an avatar, let's say for example, an avatar of Hades. He could then touch people to have like some of his powers as well.
Okay, yeah. Interesting.
And it's actually funny I say that because there actually goes into some of the other avatars you'll find in the story. There is an actual avatar of Hades, and he is a mafia boss.
Of course. What else would he be?
Yeah, he's like one of the main guys that a lot of people will talk about when they talk about avatars. And his name is Anatoly Vidales.
Oh, what a guy.
Yeah. And it kind of goes into like this whole overview of like, because they all have their own agenda, their MO, some emotions they have, motives. It says who their frontliners are, like who works for them, and then what their stronghold is. And for Vidales' stronghold, it's a Greek restaurant that's called Persephone.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I like that. It's just really cool the way that you can use these characters and myths and legends and all of that within this game. It is just fascinating.
Yeah. And as for like other resources, like it also gives you, there's MC sheets in this book as well. So that way you can like write stuff on it. Like it has like, it goes your principles and your intrusions, your moves and all that. It has an iceberg sheet. So that way you can like write out your iceberg sheet as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's tracking stuff in here. And then it actually gives you a case in the MC Toolkit called Gambling with Death. And this is like the first case, if you're using the MC Toolkit, you will run as an MC if you choose to do that.
And have you, I'm assuming not, but have you run this case yet?
I have not had a chance to run Gambling with Death yet. So for what I've heard with Gambling and Death, it almost ties into the case that's in the All-Seeing Eye Investigation starter set. Mm-hmm. So when I just finally get the time to run that set of cases, I'm going to run this one with it as well. So this is Gambling with Death is kind of like the prequel case to that story.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
So how and because I know that you have run some of the things. How good are the pre-written like cases that the City of Mist people have done?
They're really good, in my opinion, at least. So it really will go over like all the stuff you need to know, like before you start the game. Like it goes over to like I'll take Gambling with Death for example. So it goes into like part of the backstory, and it revolves around a hotel/casino manager who's a rift of like, they just call it the Emperor, but just think of like any powerful Chinese emperor in Chinese legend and lore. And that's basically what this guy is a rift of, is like this powerful emperor. Mm-hmm. And it goes into a story about like, he made this deal with death and now he's having a hard time trying to fulfill that deal. And someone ends up dying because he was unable to fulfill part of his deal. And now they're all having to explore the mystery behind that depth. And it goes in. Yeah, it will go into like the hooks that you could provide to start off the case. Like what hook gets this party to start looking into this? Mm-hmm. And then it actually has them all listed out as the different depths of this story. And then it'll give you like, if you do this, here's the stuff that you can provide for it and all of that kind of deal. And it just goes, and it really, for the MCs, when it comes to these cases, it really does provide you with everything you need to know. So that way you can run this perfectly, or you can work around it if something happens as well.
Oh, that's perfect then. Yeah, and I think that is fantastic to always have a good, like, intro, like, adventure. Yeah, adventure if you've played D&D is more so the term, but, like, an intro to actually playing the game like that, where they set it up super, super well. Especially just to, like, lead you through the process and lead the like player characters through the process as well, on actually learning the game as you play versus just kind of going in on the deep end of like doing like a homebrew thing at first. Like you could just like actually do one of these pre-written things that you'll learn the game while you play.
Yeah, and I know the free quick start on City of Mist site, it has like very basic, very, very basic idea of everything. So that way you could like run one of the two cases it comes with, like right off the bat. But if you want to be a little more in depth, you can always get the All-Seeing Eye Investigation starter set, which has almost everything you need to run an in-person City of Mist game. It has like a very basic player's guide. It's not as in depth as the actual player's guide, because the starter set actually has 5 different pre-generated characters that the players can use. Mm-hmm. Instead, and the one I mentioned, Job, the pastor Job that can't die, he's one of those characters in that set. And then nice. it also has a mini version of the Master of Ceremonies book, and it is nowhere as deep as the MC Toolkit, but it gives you basically all the main basics that you need to know, like all the moves and everything, what you can do, how to run the game. And then one thing I love about these cases is there's always a section that's called the aftermath. Mm-hmm. And this is basically like, depending on how things went, what has happened now that this is all ended. Mm-hmm. And I just like that idea because it gives you like, okay, so if this happened, what's the outcome of that? If this happened, what's the outcome of that now that this is all over kind of deal?
Absolutely. And you can kind of do that almost epilogue type thing of like going over, what changed after you run through that scenario. Oh, I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I
That's a fun way to
absolutely
end it.
I absolutely enjoy the power of the cliffhanger that it leaves on the players when it seems like you end the game, because literally for my Demons and Cross end case, since they just outright destroyed it instead of trying to seal it away, I had it end where some people were going through the site, someone finds the deer skull, and just for a moment, there's a faint glint in the skull's eye.
Oh my god. I love that so much. It's
Yeah,
so yes, and end games with more cliffhangers, even if you're not going to return to them. It's just fun.
yeah, like the cliffhanger I did for my Vias for going viral case is so good, because it was kind of stuff that I had talked about with one of the players about, because it revolved around like an NPC that was related to one of the players.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, so with the PCs and mysteries, actually, there's one thing that I wanted to go over. Custom moves.
Ah, yes. Let me get back to that. Yeah,
And
creating
how to
custom.
create them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of went over this a little bit, but not in depth. But this is more like how to if you're just entirely homebrewing an NPC or a danger, and you're coming up with a custom move for it. Like, what do you want to do with it? Like, what conditions do they have? Some custom moves may include a roll. Like literally, like there's some moves where it's like, even if you like a custom move can be like, if you even get a 7 through 9, it would be considered a failure instead of a mixed success, depending on the type of a person you're trying to make. So it's really just all about like what you're trying to do with that person for the most part, and it just kind of goes into like the different kind of guidelines for how to do certain moves, like the active shield, which is like how much of something can this person take, or how much less damage do they take. There's the countdown outcome that we talked about earlier. So when that countdown hits its status, what happens? And it actually does shows like examples of some of them on here as well. So like it says for lycanthropy, when a bite victim's transformation 3 spectrum is maxed out, he or she transforms completely. Replace bite victim with the danger hungry werewolf.
Oh no. That's dangerous. No, that's really cool. Yeah, no, I like custom moves. They're really awesome. So are these ones more so... Are the custom moves... It seems like there's options for custom moves that relate more towards like the NPCs or dangers. Are there also custom moves that are closer to like the basic moves where there's like a trigger that then you roll? Like there's a trigger that lets you use that move that then you roll for that you can create?
So usually as the MC, you're not usually using your dice for almost anything. A lot of this is kind of like preset stuff you will do.
Oh, well, I'm saying even for the characters, like, are there moves that you can set up for the character? Are there custom moves that you can create for the characters like that?
So the custom moves, I think in this book more apply to the dangers and the NPCs. I would say what you were talking about refers to like the theme improvements that players can take throughout the game, where it's like even if you get like a 7 through 9 on like a mixed success on like a roll, it could be treated as a complete success instead of a mixed success. So I would call the theme improvements almost similar to like custom moves. But then again, you also have like change the game move that can impose statuses on other people as well. When you do go toe to toe or hit with all you got, you impose statuses that way as well. So you don't really have the option as like players, as characters, to like just immediately do like a custom move. Like I don't think you wouldn't have like a countdown outcome for a player. Now an NPC can impose a countdown outcome on you for something to happen. But this is more going into talking about NPCs and dangers and custom moves for them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, cool. I'm just curious because again, I have more of my roots within Monster of the Week, and in that game, it's very flexible with you can create custom moves. Usually, you can create a custom move that your danger or your monster can use, but you can create ones that or not NPCs, that the players can use with if you just assign a stat and say what a trigger is. So I was curious if City of Mist had something similar like that as well, but that's cool that it is within the dangers because that gives a lot more flexibility on what you can do with them.
Yeah,
That's
it
awesome.
also gives the good understanding of like the challenge that you can impose like on your players as well, depending on what kind of game you're trying to run.
Mhm.
Because so when I'll start off with like if they're just doing like some mini fights here and there, I'm not gonna make them like go all out on the players because it's like this is just something that's going to lead up to like the main event. But once they get to that final boss, there's no kitty gloves on it anymore. I'm not holding back when it comes to the final boss.
Of course, because that's the final boss. I mean, like, that is the thing that you are. That is the main enemy.
I've had no TPKs yet. Keyword yet.
One day.
What?
No, but yeah, that's great. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think. There might be more things that the book covers, though I don't want to cover every single thing in the book because I do want people to, want to go out and look through it because I think personally for me, I think one of the most fun things to do is to flip through a TTRPG book just to see the concepts that they create, the rules, the mechanics, stuff like that. I find that very fascinating. So I always want people to go out and search for the book. So I don't know if I want to cover too much more within the book. I think I want to get into, do you specifically, after reading the MC Toolkit, have advice for people wanting to run City of Mist?
Definitely. I would say definitely make sure you're kind of making sure you understand concepts of your role and your principles as the MCs. Because I feel like I was already doing some of those to begin with. I don't think I was, but I just didn't realize how much of like a priority they took as being an MC.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes down to being the referee. Like I said, I think that's one if not the top like most important role that you have as an MC is you are the referee. You are in charge of how this game is run because it's also not just for the players' enjoyment; it's for your enjoyment as well. And you don't want to make yourself uncomfortable just so everyone else can be enjoying it as well. And you also have to know when to like put your foot down and draw that hard line on certain things as well.
Exactly. It's all kind of a balancing act.
But like I said, like I said the last episode, you're still wanting to have fun with it. You can still change things as you play as well. But if there's something that's going on and you're like, they're trying to fight you on it, or this is something you feel like shouldn't be doing, you got to have the courage to just put your foot down on that sometimes. Mm-hmm. And they may not always like you for it, but if that's the case for that player might not just be a good fit for your table.
Yeah, exactly. Not every person's going to fit at your table and going to fit with your play style as a MC or GM or whatever role that you are taking as running a game. It's not always a match. So it's okay if there is a problem at the table because I think those are important moments to work those things out and really know if a group is going to work together well.
Yeah, and I mean, even with those issues that I had, it's like we ended up still doing on a good game. And once I start editing and releasing those, I'm sure everyone else is going to like them too. But it was just one moment I had that I just remembered that just stuck with me still. Because I never had that much of an issue before. And then that happened. I was just like, when I think back on it now, I'm just like, I really wish I kind of was a little more stern on that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've even had those moments with some of my players where there's a point where I brought in a new rule. And so we were kind of getting used to using this new rule and stuff in my D&D game. And one of the players was fighting me on one of the aspects of the rule. And at that point, it was like, we're just going to rule it as this for now. And I'll look further into it later to see if maybe I got it wrong, if this is how it is, if that's just what we're going to have to deal with. And then any adjustments that I could make if I felt that it was necessary. And, it's not that player was wrong or anything for doing that. It was just that was what happened in that moment. It was just like the little bit of fighting on the rule. And then turns out I did misinterpret part of the rule and we were able to fix it. And now we play with that rule perfectly. But if I as also if I, as the GM, wanted to just have the rule like that and set it up that way, I would set it up the way that I already had it. I would be completely open with my players. This is how the rule is going to be. If you guys don't like it, we can see what we can adjust. If that's how the rule was going to be, and there was already a little bit of a fight on it. But I think those moments, even though they can be very frustrating or jarring, are very important to have to see if there are aspects of the game to make it better for your players, or even realizing like, oh, I have to kind of take a bigger stand like you did, Hunter, of, I need to be better at that, because then things can kind of get a little too chaotic. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with those people that will, fight on a rule. I don't always enjoy doing it at the table and like to keep it for later, but I think those are important moments.
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of like accidentally misinterpreting something or just accidentally reading a rule wrong, and I'll have the players call me out on it. I'm like, "Are you sure?" And we'll look through it together. And if I was incorrect, I'll be like, "Oh, I apologize," and either I'll retcon what happened to fit the rule, or I'll say, "Next time something like this happens again, I'll remember this rule," kind of deal. You're never gonna get anything 100% correct on everything, because just this MC Toolkit alone, there's so much into it that it's like. And like, there's stuff was like, oh yeah, I've been doing things kind of this way far, and there's other things where it's like, oh, I never even knew that was like part of it before. Mm-hmm. So it's as Jack Sparrow says, they're more like guidelines.
Exactly. The best way to look at it is that is the structure that is helping you play that game. You don't have it's guidelines. You don't have to follow every single bit. You can interpret and change rules if it fits for your table. Like, I don't think that, at least personally for me, in the way that I like to play games, I never want to play games. I never want to feel in the position that I have to play a game by the book, or else I'm playing it wrong. Because I think it's more fun to interpret and to use those rules in interesting ways, and even adjust and leave some of those rules out for your own games, because that just makes it more fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you still kind of want to keep like the basic rules and stuff for the most part. Of course. But definitely you don't want to be like 100% rules is written for every single thing. Rule cool in homebrew should always kind of take a hot step above every now and then as well, in my opinion.
Exactly. I completely agree, because it just, again, it makes more fun. Like, those are really fun moments when you can, if you play, this is just an example, D&D rules is written, things such as checks will usually take an action. So being able to like do an athletics check or something to jump over a table could, depending on the DM, might rule that as a complete action and not let you do anything more. But if you do rules cool, the DM could let you jump over that table, make that check, and then do your attack. Those types of things just make you feel even cooler. Like, it's not just, I let you get away with that. No, it's that character gets to feel so much cooler because they got to flip over a table, they got to jump over a table and then attack something, and that's just what their character would do. So they feel really awesome. So those rules of cool are so valuable.
Yeah, and if you're playing D or rules is written, that means you have to use encumbrance, and who the fuck wants that?
No one. I mean, it's great.
Which actually this is something I've actually been learning about recently, because I've been looking at other Powered by the Apocalypse games, and so this all stemmed when I started looking more into Thirsty Sword Lesbians, because hearing you talk about that, I got the books and I've been looking about it. When I decided I want to see who else is running it and what everyone's thoughts about it. It is surprisingly very mixed, the reviews for Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Powered by the Apocalypse games in general. Like, there's one guy I was watching, he was kind of doing a review, and one of the last things he said was, this is a guy who's like a very strong like D&D guy for the most part. He said Powered by the Apocalypse games are basically games for lazy GMs. And I was just kind of
is an interpretation.
It's your opinion. He has the right to it, but I don't think it's an entirely correct one. There's different GMs and everyone has different styles. But I was just so interested in how mixed like games like Thirsty Sword Legends and Powered by the Apocalypse games in general, I'm surprised at how mixed reviews about those are out there. Because again, City of Mist was my first game I ever played. I had never played D&D, never played Pathfinder, nothing like that. And so, I lean more towards the role playing and the narrative style of many games, no matter which ones I run. And so, you could say it's a lazy DM's game. I say it's for the creative GM's game, for those who want to be able to have that artistic expression, just kind of do what they want.
And go with the flow, because I think you can look at it being, you can look at someone who runs a Powered by the Apocalypse game, let's say with the looser prep style that we've talked about. You could look at that and say that's a lazy way to GM. However, sure, that could be a lazy way to GM in your eyes, but it's exactly it. You're opening up that creative freedom. You're giving those opportunities for the players to surprise you and to bring the stories in different directions, versus something like D&D, Pathfinder, things like that require more prep in general because of the way the game is, because you need to have stat blocks and plan encounters and a bunch of things like that. So it requires more prep in general. But I even run my D&D games closer to how I run my Powered by the Apocalypse games, with doing the base, beginning, middle, end thing for the sessions and keeping it as loose as possible with that structure that I need when I need it. So if I need to do more prep because I'm going to run an encounter, I'm going to do that. But I feel like it puts a lot less pressure on the people who are running the games, the GMs, to have something that is, quote unquote, a lazier GM game, because it gives you so much more that you can work off of, and it isn't completely on you all the time to then stress you out and do hours of prep before each session.
A lot of GMs would actually say that either doing little prep or barely any prep is the best way to run a game, because if you can create like a whole entire storyline for how you want something to go, and the players are just still going to automatically throw it out the window at some point with something. All it takes is for one thing to go wrong, and your whole thing's now out the window.
Exactly. So, yeah. It's just in my opinion, because these are all about opinions. If your play style is you really like to do those super high prep, crunchier games, and you enjoy that, go ahead, do it. No one's stopping you, because those are fun for you. Play those games. If you don't like things that are lower prep or, again, quote unquote, lazier DM style or GM style, don't play those games. Those aren't for you, but those are for plenty of other people. And I think the worst thing that you can do is try and force yourself to fit into a game and a game style that doesn't work for you, because that is going to cause, even if it is low prep and that is, I guess, technically easier, that might cause you more stress, because that is just not how your GM style works, and that just doesn't fit your play style in general. So you should play something that matches your style of game much better.
I do want to add this in really quick, because it does say this in the MC Toolkit too. It says you don't want to completely railroad your characters when they're playing, which I understand to an extent, but I want to add that sometimes railroading is okay if you're still trying to stay on story and your players are just going completely like off the rails entirely, like not even playing the game at that point in general. And this
I agree in instances.
And this was another issue I had, was after the final session was done recording and everything, the same player accused me of, I never heard this term before, I guess god modding or god moding the game to an extent which I guess they were trying to say I was being too controlling or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think there were some instances I look back, I'm like, yeah, I probably was like this or there. But at the same point, it's like, I'm running a podcast. We have this case we're trying to run. I don't have the free time for the players to just go all over the place and do whatever they feel like doing. It's like, there's still a story. Like, if it tied into the actual game that was happening, then yeah, they could go do that. I have no issue with that. But if the players all coming together, it's like they're running to be part of this story and trying to solve this case that happens, that should be part of the focus of the players in the game, not just
especially for a podcast.
Yeah, not just to always go and do whatever they want. Which, depending on if there's like if it's a downtime thing, yeah, go do what you want. Like we discussed, like you could easily just go out and like power yourself up, no problem. But when the recording's on and the mics are picking up the audio, yeah, we got stuff we got to do. And it's like,
because that creates more editing for you to then have to go back and be like, okay, parts that don't, I guess, really matter depending on, how you want to edit your episodes. There's always, I feel like, negative association with Railroad. And I think most of the time, in a lot of cases, that's understandable. Because there are GMs that want to control the game at any point and play a very specific story. But I think there's a difference between Railroad and trying to keep on track, which is, again, a part of the role as a GM, as the person running the game. Part of your role is to keep people on track, keep the story going, stuff like that. So for me, I've always found, and I don't want to use the term Railroad, but in my case, I've run a few one-shots where things will start to, go like break into role play, or they want to start to do that. I'll usually let that happen for a bit, give those players that like brief moment of satisfaction, like they were able to do this thing, because I want them to have fun. And then I'm still able to kind of bring it back to what they're doing. And it's like, all right, what next is happening? You just completed this room, you completed this challenge in this room. What's going on next? This person, or like the person who's running this exam, because I played Definitely Wizards not that long ago. This person running the exam is going to start to introduce the next room, and we're going to start going that way. And with those types of things, because it's like a one shot or like a mini game where we're only playing like 1 to 3 sessions, we're going to keep things more on track and all of that and more focused, because we want to try and get the story done. We want to try and get that situation over with. And I think that's, again, where playstyle can come into play, is if those people just really wanted to more so enjoy the game as a sandbox versus try and follow the specific story. That's a bit of a mix of expectations.
So there's actually a podcast I listen to, and these guys have supported me since day one, and I've done them likewise. They're a D&D podcast group called the Eldritch Buds. And the DM Connor created this homebrew world setting for the players. So, spoiler alert for this story if you haven't listened to it yet, but they've been going on for a while. They're in like the 30s or 40s on their episodes now, I think. Mm-hmm. So there's a point in the story where they're all working under this guy and the guy's daughter. The daughter gets kidnapped, and so the father sends the party out to go find them. For the next 10 episodes, they're in this city doing everything but looking for this guy's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually messaged Connor about this, and I was just like, are they going to do anything? Are they going to actually go with the story? And he's like, I got something planned in mind. So about another 10 episodes later after that, they find a daughter, but the daughter's mind has now been implanted in a giant murder hobo robot.
Oh my.
And it was one of those things where it's like, well, because you derailed it for so long, this is now the consequence of that.
Mm-hmm. And that is fair. And that's the thing as well. I guess that's more so for me. I don't like looking. I mean, yeah, that was the consequence. Though I don't always want that to feel like a negative thing, because that's just then the new direction that story is going to go in. But it does suck when players do go off track for a bit. And it's hard, especially as a GM, to be like, I want them to enjoy and have fun. But also, and it's the whole thing with the referee, where it's like, I want this thing, I want them to have fun, but I also want to stay true to whatever the game's going to be, whatever the story we're going through. And it can be very frustrating. And actually, you saying that reminds me of a situation that happened in my own personal game, my D&D game, where they were traveling and they were deciding to visit the home of one of the characters. And what was going to be supposed to just visit, and then they were continuing on with this much bigger mission of trying to defeat essentially an army from this island that's slowly taking over the continent. That was the whole goal. But they ended up spending, like, instead of one to 3 sessions in this place, which would have been enough, they ended up spending almost, I think it was 10 or 11 sessions in this place, and mostly just messing around and not really doing things with the story. And I always have a hard time looking back on that, because it's like, yes, that was really fun. We had a good time. We were able to do some fun roleplay things and some fun, like, kind of goofing off things. But at the same time, made no progress in the actual story. And I did have to make decisions for what was happening within the whole world and what was happening around them and advancements that happened there, because they spent so much time within this city doing nothing. So actually, I very much feel I feel that story that you shared, because it's very hard to kind of control both sides. Be like, I want them to have fun, but I want to make sure that we play this story.
Yeah, I think the part that really drove me kind of a little more hardcore about that is it was even after she did that, and even after I apologized, she ended up like blocking me from messaging her on Discord, which really stunk, because I was actually in the process of making an artwork made for them of their characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I was just kind of like, really? You failed this. I apologize, even though I now really don't think I really had to apologize that much as I did for it. And then you're going to be petty like that. It's kind of my thing. And it's just like, fine, whatever then. At that point.
People should be also more... I feel this very personally. I think people should be okay and more accepting of making mistakes in games like this. It's so easy. It's so easy to rule something wrong, or make a mistake in the story, or making a mistake for someone's character, or a character making a mistake. And those mistakes can be, maybe I was a little bit too controlling. But that's something that you kind of have to learn about yourself, and then you can improve. You have to make those mistakes to learn. And at least for me, I think people should be more accepting of mistakes like that. And it can really suck to play in a game where, it feels a certain way. But I think that mistakes in general for TTRPG should be more accepted, because you're all doing this together. It's a group of people playing the game. There are bound to be mistakes, especially if you're running a new game or a system or a story, anything like that. There's going to be mistakes. And so that does really suck that happened. And that should have been a moment, instead of contention, it should have been a moment to try and talk this out. And, be like, it felt a little... The person could have been like, it felt a little controlling, and that you could have then taken that as, criticism, which sucks, but you can then take that to future games and keep that in mind to try and fix that. Or maybe that was just that person's experience and what they thought, and you can still keep that in mind and within future games that you play. And then you can become a better game runner by making these mistakes and hearing them from your players.
Yeah, I completely agree with you 100% on that. It's like, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think also, it was also one of the things where this was all, the majority of this was all said like after it was all done. Instead of like just throughout the case, it was like, hey, there's this and this. Because I'm one of those guys where unless you tell me outright that I'm possibly doing something wrong, I can't change what I don't know needs to be changed, kind of deal. That's part of the autism.
Yeah, you can't know.
That's part of the autism in me, is because I can't pick up on social cues and I can't read your mind. So unless you tell me upright, hey, this has been going on, we don't like this, or I think you're being too controlling here, I can't fix that if you don't tell me. So that was also part of the other issue, I think, was they saved it all for the very end. But other than that, yeah, you are absolutely 100% right.
Yeah, no, I think Another thing that I truly like, making mistakes in TTRPGs, I think needs to be normalized. I think also just being better at communicating during games should also be the norm, because I have made some massive improvements in my own games with just with just opening up communication better and creating an environment where where the players can come to me if they are having a hard time with the game, and even starting those conversations myself if I see signs of, oh wait, this person might not be enjoying this right now, and trying to deal with those instances when they happen versus letting them kind of, and I'm not saying you let it like boil over or anything like that. It was the person that needed to kind of bring that up to you, and just kind of creating an open space for those conversations is, I think, really, really important when it comes to running TTRPGs, so that everyone knows what's happened. So you don't have to rely on trying to read someone's mind.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that.
But yeah.
Going over the MC Toolkit and then just being MCs in general, it ties perfectly in.
It really does, because I think that's a bit of a benefit with this podcast, is having those conversations of just talking about experiences and ways that, you know, different people create stories or approach games or approach even running games and playing games, stuff like that. I think those are some of my favorite moments. You know, I love to hear about the games. I love learning about them and exploring. That's my favorite thing. But also something I love as well is just those conversation moments of like exactly what we just did, talking about the, you know, the situation, communication, making mistakes and stuff like that. So I think it is fantastic. But I think, oh yeah, I was actually about to say, I think we're about to the end here, though. I'm trying to think if there's some other stuff that we haven't covered.
Like, I will just kind of add on top of all this. If you all decide to get this, you can actually get the player's guide and the MC toolkit with a MC screen as well to go with it. And the MC screen has like all the player moves and MC moves in it as well. So that way you have that in advance as well. So you don't have to flip the book every time for everything. But
perfect.
If you listen to these two City and Mist podcasts we do, because we basically went over basically the majority of the player's guide in the first one. Then we just went almost a full depth on the MC toolkit. If you like these, you get the books and you enjoy it, I highly recommend you get the Into the Mist set, which contains the Knights of Pain Town campaign book, and then the expansion Shadows and Showdowns, which has a bunch of other great details. And I definitely don't think we're going to come back and talk about that. I'm going to leave that one for the listeners to check out for themselves if they just enjoy it that much.
Get into City of Mist. It's really cool game. I haven't actually played it myself yet, but hearing the stories from Hunter and like all the things from it, I'm like, yes, I'm very excited. I'm slowly playing through games right now. I have like a small group that we've just been playing on Mondays. It's like we're just gonna play this game this week and this game that week. So I'm very excited to get to City of Mist with that, because it is a very cool game. And yeah, you know, if you are interested, go look into the game itself. It's by Son of Oak Game Studio. And they have all their books. You can get physical or PDF copies of their books. They're all fantastic. Make sure to check out Hunter's podcast, Mysteries Unknown. Mystery spelled with an I instead of a Y, because Mist, of course. And then also the Rolling in the Mist podcast as well, so that you can check out and see how these games are actually played and hear examples of them, because actual plays are a fantastic way to really get into games and learn about them, like, really thoroughly. So, yeah, thank you so much, Hunter, for coming on again and talking about the MC Toolkit with me.
Yeah, it was really fun. I love being on here. And I have a feeling this definitely will not be the last time I'm on here, since there's so many other TTRPGs as well, especially since I decided to finally get the Girl by Moonlight. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Yes. And unless you find someone better than me to get on there, I'll probably be back on at who knows what point. But I'm pretty sure this will not be the last for sure.
Exactly. A point in time, we'll figure out a game, we'll figure out something.
All right. Can I shout out my plugs real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
And so if you ever want to follow me, reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram, either at Mist Podcast, MISTUNK Podcast for Mysteries Unknown, or you can follow me at IDK How to DM, which is my I Don't Know How to DM podcast / TTRPG meme page, as I call it. And you can, and if you want to reach out to discuss anything else, you can always hit me up at mistunkpodcast@gmail.com.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I totally recommend checking out all of Hunter's Instagrams and following along with the podcast as well, because he's fantastic and it's all fantastic. Just get into fantastic games, please.
Get the game! Get the game!
Get the game, exactly. If City of Mist sounds awesome, get City of Mist, because also the books are really, really cool. But yes, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode. And yeah, this is the end.
See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I had a fantastic time recording it with Hunter, and the conversations were just amazing, especially since I love delving deep into all things about running games. Plus, City of Mist is amazing itself. If you haven't yet, please make sure to leave a review for the RPG Goblin if you've been enjoying it so far. Every little bit of support really means the world, so make sure to leave a review, follow the RPG Goblin on wherever you listen to your podcasts, and follow the RPG Goblin on social media as well. The RPG Goblin is on Instagram at the RPG Goblin, dots in between each of the words, and Twitter at the RPG Goblin. Again, Hunter is an amazing guest, and if you would like to check out what he does, please make sure to go follow him on Instagram at Mistunk Podcast, also at IDK How to DM. Also, make sure to listen to his actual podcast, Mysteries Unknown, which is an actual play podcast where he runs City of Mist games. And just from the stories that I've heard and that you have heard as well, it sounds amazing, so please go check him out. Alright, so the next episode of the RPG Goblin will be coming out June 16th, and it will be about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And oh my god, I'm so excited to share this with you. This was, again, a really fantastic recording, and I know I say that a lot, but this one was just amazing. As someone who started playing D&D, it was mind-blowing to hear all about Pathfinder. So, next episode, which will be, again, coming out June 16th, will be about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where I bring on Jack from Dying 5 podcast, aka a Pathfinder actual play podcast. So if that sounds awesome, then you should make sure to mark that on your calendars and look out for the next episode. I think that is it, though. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please leave a review, and I'll see you next time.